The art happens inside the viewer. Somebody comes and sees a work from their collection, and when that individual interacts with this object or image, that's when the art happens. It happens inside that viewer when they come into contact with their own interests and their own potential.
Making art more accessible opens the conversation of possibilities of what art can be.
Art is about communication, and if you never get seen, it has no impact.
The story of the Broad is really three stories. The collectors, the two Angelenos behind the art, the collection, the artists and works that bring contemporary art to life, and the museum, the architectural home for the collection where the art is displayed.
We know there's always been a lot of speculation about what's going to happen with our collections. Edie and I have lived here for 48 years. This is a great city. It's been very good to us, and we want to give back. So Los Angeles clearly is a fitting home for our art collections.
Married for more than 60 years, Eli and Edith Broad have lived uncommonly fulfilling lives. An entrepreneur at heart with the drive to build, Eli Broad created 2 Fortune 500 companies in home building and retirement savings. As philanthropists, the Broads applied those same qualities to their interests in education, scientific and medical research, and the arts, devoting their time and resources to create and build public institutions and to give back to their adopted hometown, Los Angeles. Eli Broad was the founding chairman of the Museum of Contemporary Art and played an important role in the emergence of Grand Avenue as the cultural heart of the city.
I don't think that there's a prominent public building of the last 15 years in Los Angeles that he hasn't been involved with. I think that you could almost say that there wouldn't be a civic architectural tradition in LA, at least a recent one, without his support and interest.
We simply wouldn't have Walt Disney Concert Hall without Eli's vision. And I think we come back to that again and again, that Eli had a vision for the city, he had a vision for Grand Avenue, and we are seeing the realization of that continually roll out.
They appreciate what LA has given them, and they feel the need to give back. There aren't a lot of people that do as much for this city as they do, and we're very, very appreciative of that.
Eli and Edie Broad also collected one of the most important collections of post-war and contemporary art in America, a collection that reflects significant aspects of the art created since World War II. The Broads began collecting shortly after they moved to Southern California in 1963. Los Angeles was not known as an art center in the early 60s, until a small cadre of influential galleries sprang up around the pivotal Ferris Gallery, run by Irving Blum and Walter Hopps. Ferris became famous for balancing shows featuring lesser-known LA artists with exhibitions of avant-garde art from New York-based artists like Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol.
All the galleries on Monday night were open on La Cienega, and you could go up and down the street, and the things weren't so crazy expensive. I saw the show that Irving Blum had with all the soup cans, but I didn't buy that because I thought Eli would have me committed.
She was, as Eli often says, the first collector in the family, and she always wanted to have a connection or exposure to artists and artworks. It's a very, very genuine passion that comes from a very, I think, heartfelt place for her.
In 1973, Eli and Edie Broad purchased their first significant work.
We started looking at post-impressionist work, and we're following the auctions, and I saw there was a wonderful drawing of Van Gogh from 1889. And we bid on it. And
we got it.
We bought it. First time I've ever bid at an auction.
It was fun. It was a
It
little
was
scary.
successful.
It was a
Being
little
successful means you're willing to pay more than anyone in the world for an object.
It was a little scary to spend that much money, $95,000. Our first house cost $16,000, so.
After acquiring several historic works, the Broads became interested in contemporary art. They began visiting artist studios, making ample time on New York business trips to see new art. They visited Keith Haring, whose studio was covered with his famous figurative markings, as well as Jean-Michel Basquiat and Cindy Sherman. The Broads collected all these artists in the early 80s and became passionately involved in the art of the moment.
And it was more available. You could meet the artist and have a dialogue. And it just seemed that most collections were built during the time or a little after the work was being made. And so that was what was being made in our time. So it just seemed more logical to collect it.
The purchase of an untitled work by Robert Rauschenberg in 1983 proved to be a pivotal moment for the Broads. To complete the sale, they had to trade their beloved Van Gogh. The purchase was both symbolic and a sign of things to come. The Rauschenberg represented a new devotion to the work of living artists, as well as a commitment to the body of American art that still interests them today, pop.
I think that where his interest in contemporary art comes in has a lot to do with his innate curiosity, but it also has to do with his interest in entertaining opposite points of view.
By 1984, Eli and Edie Broad had run out of wall space at their home, but still wanted to continue collecting. So they created the Broad Art Foundation as an innovative lending library to make works from their collection available to museums around the world. Over the past 3 decades, the foundation has made more than 8,000 loans to some 500 museums and galleries. The foundation's goal of making contemporary artwork accessible to as many people as possible is evident in the museum's focus, as well as its free general admission.
We don't want to simply have art in storage and so on. We want this art to be seen. We want to share it.
That's what helped
We want to
us.
share our passion with others.
As the Broad Art Foundation continued collecting, building in essence a sizable public collection, its interests expanded alongside the continuing innovations of an evolving art community. Holdings in pop art grew, as did examples of German art, for which the Broads had developed a specific interest. The rate the Broads collected remained relatively constant, but by the mid-90s, newer mediums like video and installation art were being added to the collection. Collecting artists in great depth is one of the defining qualities of the collection. When the Broads acquire their first work by an artist, it signals the beginning of a relationship with that artist and their body of work as it evolves.
Eli and Edie would make a relationship with an artist. Cindy Sherman, as an example, buying early pictures when she was still, at the front desk of an art gallery, and then follow that artist's work to the present. They have something very special.
They're interested in the work that an artist produces over a lifetime. So even works that aren't so well received or that are difficult or challenging.
In his collection, he has a good cross section of my work over the years. He purchased some of my earlier work that I truly feel great about.
But I've always thought of them as, really dedicated collectors. And it, doesn't happen often that people, start with an artist who's quite young and then continue over the years.
Eli and Edie together have had a tremendous impact in my life as an artist. Their support has been very meaningful as far as being able to kind of shine a light to at least other people the possible relevance of my work.
Jeff Koons is an artist. They didn't just collect once he was fashionable in the art market. They were collecting early on, following the work, having a relationship with the artist. And I think that gives, especially those core artists, a very special place in the Broad collection, and the Broad collection a very special place in contemporary art history.
Eli and Edith, in a way, they are the modern day J.P. Morgans, the Fricks of the age. They had the vision and the courage to get out there and collect in depth.
The collection has also embraced art that illustrates and provides commentary on important political, racial, and cultural themes.
There's a very strong emphasis on social and political art in the collection, and that's something I think is very important to the Broads. They have deep collections in certain artists who work very seriously and directly on rather difficult social and political content.
There's one part that's about upsetting a viewer's anticipated response. People get upset, people get angry, sometimes people get very sad, sometimes people laugh, and I think there's a kind of giddy something that I want to bring into the world. It's not changing the world, but it's changing a set of, anticipated responses or perceptions.
They've tried to build a synthetic collection that really covers a period of time from the 1950s to the present, but also to collect in depth. They have been fortunate enough to often get great works of art, but they've built around those great works of art the texture that gives a collection context.
This is what's fun about collecting contemporary art. You're kind of, you're sort of chasing butterflies. You're trying to capture an era. You're trying to pick the artists who have the most interesting view of either an issue that's going on in art or an issue that's of social and political significance.
With 2,000 works by over 200 artists, the Broad Collection has grown into one of the broadest and deepest privately owned contemporary art collections in the country, but it still lacked a permanent home.
The museum is 40 years in the making, because that's when my wife and I started collecting art. And we said several years ago, it's time for us to get it all together in one venue and open it up to the public.
An architectural competition was held. The submitted designs were to provide creative solutions for a building that needed to combine beautiful galleries with a significant amount of space devoted to storage.
One of the paradoxes, really, of the program was that the ambition of this building was largely as a storage and archive for the art, and there was a smaller percentage of space given over to display. So that paradox actually fueled the design.
We always had a program of what the museum ought to be, its function, and where things should be. But we had no idea what the design would be.
When the Broads selected Diller and Scofidio, they selected an architectural team who's one of the most significant working today. Their work in New York, their work around the world, everyone's looking at what they're doing.
I think the challenge for Liz was building next to an icon. And she took a very courageous approach.
It stood up to but engaged with Disney Concert Hall across the street in a way that made 1 + 1 = 3.5.
The building that we imagine does something very different with light. The Disney Hall reflects light. As a museum, we really want to collect light, and we want to channel it into the core of the building.
Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro's design had two prominent features: the vault, the storage area, and the veil, the facade that would control and channel light into the museum.
The vault is, again, it's sculptural, it's solid, it's mysterious.
The idea of the vault as this sort of massive, heavy, enclosed thing that floats up in the middle of the building and is, kind of covered by and concealed by the veil, but is always present.
Liz took our directive to make sure we could store most or all of the collection on site. Mm-hmm. She took that very much to heart and put the storage of the collection right in the center of the building. No one does that. You normally have storage in the back, in the basement, you put it out of sight. This was done in a very different, creative way that I think is really a new approach to museum buildings.
The veil is all about bringing in a light and illuminating the top surface of the vault, which is the display space.
The main gallery, an acre of column-free space, sits atop the vault and below one of the most iconic portions of the veil.
We designed these skylights digitally, and the intention was to have a sublime space. When I walked in the first time, I was really stunned by how well it worked.
The Broad also features gallery space for temporary exhibitions. The dense second-floor vault includes views into the art storage, with glimpses of works that visitors may see displayed on future visits.
We want the Broad to have an international audience. We want more people in Los Angeles to become acquainted with contemporary art.
The Broads really, from the very beginning, put these public and private concerns together, this notion of a real, genuine passion for art together with a strong desire to share it.
Today, the Broad is dedicated to making contemporary art accessible to a wide audience with robust public programming, including a series of highly popular conversations between artists and cultural luminaries called the Unprivate Collection. Talks that were held even before the museum opened. And the Broad Collection continues to grow rapidly, adding on average a new artwork each week, engaging with new artists, and exploring new thinking and trends in art.
It is important to show art in a public context because art is what we have to transmit to future generations about ourselves. And I think having a conversation about the objects and the ideas that really matter to us is vitally important, especially in a democracy where we need to create shared values and shared ideas.
I think for children to go to a museum and be excited and learn about what they see, that's your future audience. It's just something, an addition to your life that makes it worthwhile.
I hope to see people at the Broad from all walks of life. I hope to see families at the Broad. I hope to see young people at the Broad, old people, everyone who has the least bit of curiosity about contemporary art.
This is a great city. It's been a great meritocracy. It's been very good to me. We want to give back. And I think this is a gift to the people of Los Angeles and the public.